She was standing on the wrong side of the glass door at 7:22 p.m. on a Thursday in November, and the hostess inside was shaking her head before the woman had finished speaking. The woman's name was Adaze Owusu. She was 51 years old, 134 pounds, and she had walked 9 blocks from the bus stop on Halsted and 47th in the Bronzeville neighborhood of Chicago because the night air had gone cold and the bus had been 31 minutes late. Her coat was a dark brown wool that she had owned for 11 years. It was still thick, still warm, still shaped correctly across the shoulders, but the right cuff had been repaired twice, once with brown thread and once, when the brown thread ran out, with a slightly darker brown that did not quite match. She had pressed the coat that morning on the kitchen counter with a cloth iron she had owned since 1999. The coat looked clean because it was clean. It looked old because it was old. The hostess inside the glass door had registered one of those two facts. "We require a reservation," the hostess said, but the door was not fully open when she said it, and she said it to the gap between the door and the frame rather than to the woman's face. Adaze explained that she did not have a reservation. She explained that she was meeting no one. She had come alone. She explained that she understood the restaurant was busy, that she could wait, that she would be happy to sit at the bar or any table that was available, however small. She said all of this quietly, without her hands moving the way a person speaks when they have learned that keeping still prevents misunderstanding. The hostess looked once at the coat, then at the plastic bag Adaze was holding, a white grocery bag with the handles knotted, containing a small wrapped item she had been carrying for 3 days and had not yet delivered. Then the hostess looked past her toward the sidewalk, as if checking for someone more appropriate who might be arriving. "I'm sorry," the hostess said. "We're fully booked." Through the glass, Adaze could see 4 empty tables. She did not point this out. She had learned over the course of a life that had required her to learn it, that pointing out the gap between what someone says and what is visible does not change what they say. She said thank you. She stepped back from the door. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment with the cold coming up through the soles of her shoes. She had worn her good shoes, black leather flats, with a low heel that she had bought from a shop on South Boulevard 9 years ago for $38 and resold twice since. And then she looked down at the plastic bag and said something very quietly that nobody heard. There was a man on a sidewalk near the restaurant's awning. He was wearing a city green canvas jacket and smoking his phone face up on the railing beside him. He had watched the entire exchange through the glass. He looked at Adaze for a moment, then looked at his phone, then looked back at her. "They do that sometimes," he said. She nodded once. "You can try next door," he said. "Different people. Thank you," she said. And she walked. She did not try next door. She sat on the bench at the corner of 48th and Prairie Avenue, under a streetlight that buzzed faintly at a frequency she could feel in her back teeth. She sat with the plastic bag on her lap and her hands folded over it. The temperature on her phone said 38 degrees Fahrenheit. The phone's screen had a crack running diagonal from the upper left corner, a crack that had been there since last February and had not spread. She had not replaced the phone because the crack did not affect the screen. She was careful with things. She had always been careful with things. The bench was cold through her coat. The wind came along Prairie Avenue from the south, and it pushed a paper cup past her feet end over end, and it pushed the hem of her coat against her shin, and it did not stop. A bus passed going north, and the heat from it reached her for 2 seconds and then left. 2 women walked past on the sidewalk in front of her, wearing puffy coats and boots and talking at the same time without listening to each other, and neither of them looked at her. A man walking a brown dog came from the other direction, and the dog pulled toward her, and he pulled the dog back, and they were past her in 4 seconds. She had been on this bench before, not this exact bench. She did not live in Bronzeville. She lived 18 blocks north in a 1-bedroom apartment on East 30th Street that she had occupied for 12 years, for which she paid $897 a month, which was $114 more than she had paid when she first moved in. She had been on benches like this before, in the nighttime cold of a Chicago November, in the position of a person who has been redirected and is deciding what to do with that. She knew the specific quality of that stillness. It was not defeat, it was the pause before you figure out what you actually have left to work with. She had two things left to work with. She had the photograph, and she had the knowledge that the bus home did not run past 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday from this stop, and it was now 7:51. Inside the plastic bag was a small wooden frame, 4 inches by 6 inches, containing a photograph. The photograph was of two women. One of them was Adaze, 23 years younger, in a yellow dress, laughing with her head tilted slightly to the right. The other woman in the photograph was shorter, broader, with the same jaw and the same tilt of the head, and she was laughing too. The shorter woman had been dead for 8 days. Her name had been Adaze's sister, and Adaze had walked 9 blocks in 38-degree weather through the Bronzeville neighborhood of Chicago to bring this photograph to the restaurant where Amma had worked for 22 years, because Amma had once told her, twice, actually in different years, that if she ever died before she got to retire, she wanted someone to bring something of hers back to the place she had loved most. Adaze had been carrying that wish for 8 days and had not yet been able to get through the door. She had tried on Monday. The lunch manager had told her, through a barely open door, that deliveries came through the back. She had explained it was not a delivery. He had asked if it was for pickup. She had said no, it was a personal item for the staff from the family of a former employee. He had asked if she had a contact name. She had given Emma's name. The pause that followed told her he did not recognize it, or if he did, he was not certain enough to proceed without authorization. He said he would leave a note. She had waited 3 days for a call back. No call came. She had tried on Tuesday. There had been a private event. A woman at the side entrance with a clipboard had delivered the information about the public entrance with the practiced pleasantness of someone who has said the same sentence 14 times that evening and is conserving energy for the 15th. Adaze had stood outside for a moment at the exact seam where the awning's shadow ended and the open night began, and then she had walked back to the bus stop. On the bus, she had counted 2 attempts, both absorbed by the institution without leaving a mark. Thursday was the earliest she had been able to get back. She worked an overnight shift at a dry cleaning facility on Michigan Avenue, 11 p.m., to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week, and had been for the last 9 years. Thursdays off came every other week. The Thursday that had just arrived was the one she had been waiting for. She smelled faintly of chemical solvent and something like warm cotton, a smell she had stopped being able to detect on herself, but that the woman at her church sometimes mentioned gently, the way people mention things they've learned not to make a problem. Her hands were rough, not dirty, rough. The kind of rough that comes from years of work done in heat with specific chemicals that dry the skin at the knuckles and the base of the fingers. She moisturized them every morning with shea butter. Every morning they were rough again by afternoon. She had accepted this the same way she accepted most things that could not be changed, by continuing. She sat on that bench for 7 minutes. Then she stood up, adjusted the plastic bag in her grip, and walked back toward the restaurant. She did not know what she was going to do differently. She knew only that she was not going to get on the bus with that photograph still in her hands. She had promised Emma something in the way that you promise a person something during the last 3 days of their life, in a hospital room where the ceiling tiles have water stains and the television remote is fixed to the bed rail with a zip tie. Not a formal promise, not a promise with words, but a promise made by the way you hold someone's hand while they're talking and the way you do not look away. The man in the canvas jacket was gone. The awning above the restaurant entrance read Joe Canoe in raised bronze lettering. Below it, in smaller lettering, West African Kitchen and Bar, established 2001. There were candles on every table inside. There was music that came through the glass wall in low, warm pulses. There was a woman near the back of the restaurant whose laugh Adaze could not hear, but whose face she could see through the window. Her face was open and easy, and she was leaning toward the person across from her, the way people lean when they are in exactly the right place. Amma had worked at that table. Adaze knew it from the photographs on her sister's phone, from 22 years of Sunday calls where Amma described the regulars by their orders rather than their names. The woman who always got the light soup with extra ginger, the old man who came in every Thursday with a different briefcase but the same hat, the two brothers who ordered the same thing every time and then traded plates halfway through because neither of them could ever decide. Adaze pushed open the glass door. The same hostess was there, behind the same podium, with the same practiced readiness to manage the situation. Before the hostess could speak, Adaze said, "My name is Adaze Owusu. My sister was Ama Owusu. She worked here for 22 years. She passed away 8 days ago, and I have something that belongs here. I am not asking to dine. I am asking for 5 minutes." The hostess's expression changed, not dramatically, but specifically. The readiness left it. Something else came in behind it, something uncertain. "I need to get my manager," she said. "Please," Adez said. The manager who came was a man in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. He had the look of a person who has managed things for a long time and knows the weight of each kind of situation by the way it announces itself. This one announced itself differently than the usual kinds. He looked at Adaze. He looked at the plastic bag. He said, "Come with me." He led her to a table near the back, a corner table, 4 chairs, 2 candles, a window that looked onto the alley but was hung with copper-colored cloth that made the alley invisible. He pulled out a chair for her. She sat down, which she had not expected to do, and when she sat down, something let go in her body, something she had been holding since Monday, or since 8 days ago, or longer than that. If this story is already sitting inside you somewhere, stay with me. What happens in the next few minutes is something neither of them could have seen coming from either direction. The manager's name was Tobena. He had been at Jakonu for 14 years. He sat across from her with his hands folded on the table, and he listened without speaking while she explained about the photograph and about Amma and about the Sunday calls and about the promise that was not spoken in words. He did not fill the silences. He did not offer condolences in the way that people offer condolences when they need to say something because silence requires more composure than they have. He simply listened, and the candlelight moved between them, and in the kitchen behind the half wall, there was the low sound of something being reduced in a pan. When she finished, he said, "She trained me." Adaze looked at him. "I started here in 2010 as a line cook. Amma was the one who showed me how we did things, not the food, the way we do things, the way you greet people who come in alone, the way you fold the cloth napkins, the way you never let a candle burn below a certain point before you replace it." He paused. "She told me once that the candles were the most important thing because people who came in feeling invisible needed to be able to see their own hands." Ades set the plastic bag on the table. She unwrapped the photograph. She set it face up between the candles. Tobena looked at it for a long time without speaking. "She's laughing," he said. "She was always laughing," Ades said. He stood up. He was gone for 4 minutes. When he came back, he was not alone. Behind him was a woman in her 70s, small, wearing a dark green wrap dress and low heels, with her silver hair pulled back simply and her hands clasped in front of her. She walked without the careful management of steps that older people sometimes adopt, walking instead the way a person walks through their own home, which is exactly what she was doing. This was her restaurant. Had been her restaurant since she opened it in 2001 with her late husband's name in the title and his recipe for light soup in the kitchen, and she had been in the back office reviewing next month's staffing numbers when Tobena knocked. Her name was Nana Jokanu. She looked at Adaze the way some people look at a face they recognize without being able to say from where. She came around the table and she sat down, not across from her, but beside her, pulled a chair around, and sat with her shoulder close to Adaze's shoulder. And she looked at the photograph between the candles. "Ama," she said. One word, the name landed on the table like something set down after a long time of being carried. She had known. She had known since Monday when the lunch manager had told her a woman had come to the back door asking about delivering something for a former employee. She had known since Tuesday when the front door had been locked for the private event. She had been waiting, not in the way of someone laying a trap, but in the way of someone who knew this would come and did not yet know what to do when it arrived, because grief is like that, because you can know something is coming and still not know how to be ready for it. She turned to Adaze. Her eyes were dry, her voice was steady. She said, I want to tell you about the last Thursday she worked. She brought in jolly of rice in a black plastic container for the whole kitchen, not store-bought, not catered, cooked herself at home at 5 in the morning. She left a note on the container that said, for the people who make the candles worth it. Adaze said nothing. Her chin moved once. I kept the note, Nana said. It's on the corkboard in the kitchen. They sat there for a while, the three of them, with the photograph between the candles, and the music coming softly through the room, and the sound of the kitchen going on the way kitchens go on, because they have to, because people are still hungry and the night is still going. Nana asked Adaze if she had eaten. Adaze said she had not since this morning, a small thing, crackers and tea. Nana said, then you're staying. She said it the way Tabena had said, come with me. Not as an invitation to accept or decline, but as a simple statement of what was going to happen, delivered quietly, with the authority of someone who means every word they say and uses only the words they mean. Adaze stayed. She was brought light soup first, the real kind, the kind with the depth that comes from time and from knowing. She was brought jollof rice with fried plantain and a small dish of shito on the side that she did not ask for, but understood immediately. The food arrived the way food arrives in a place that has been feeding people for 22 years, without ceremony, but without carelessness, with the particular attention that exists in the middle of those two things. Tabena sat with her for part of the meal. He told her about the early years, when Amma had run the floor almost alone on Friday nights, when the kitchen had flooded during a summer storm, and she had organized the staff to serve from a tent on the sidewalk, and the restaurant had been full by 8 p.m. Anyway, he told her about a regular customer, a retired schoolteacher who came every Thursday with a different briefcase, who had asked about Amma the previous week and had sat very quietly when Tabena told him. Adaze smiled at this. She would have hated him feeling sad, she said. She would have brought him extra plantain, Tabena said. Later, after the plates were cleared and a small cup of ginger tea appeared at her elbow without her asking, Nana came back. She sat across from Adaze this time. She had something in her hand, a small folded card, cream-colored, restaurant-headed. She set it on the table. I would like to put Amma's photograph in the front of the restaurant, she said, near the door where the light hits in the morning. There's a small shelf there. We've kept the candle on it since we opened. I would like to put her there, if that's what you came to do. Adaze looked at the photograph, at the woman in the yellow dress with her head tilted to the right. That's what I came to do, she said. 3 days later, a maintenance company was called to fix the lighting above the front shelf. The hostess, who had stood at the door on Thursday, was present during the small ceremony when the photograph was placed. She had asked to be there, which was not required of her, and which she had asked for quietly to Tabena in the break room on Friday morning. He had said, of course. She had not said anything else. She had stood with her hands at her sides and looked at the photograph, and then looked at the candle, and then gone back to work. The cream-colored card Nana had left on the table was a standing invitation. A table, every Thursday, whenever Adaze wanted it, for as long as the restaurant was open. No reservation required. Her name was in the reservation book at the front of the system, listed not under reservation, but under family. Nana sent a letter the following week to the ownership group that held the restaurant's lease. It was not a long letter. It said that the front of house training protocols would be updated before the first of the following month, that going forward, every member of the floor staff would complete a 4-hour session on the difference between a policy and a judgment, and that the session would be designed and led by Tabena, who had learned everything he knew about how to treat people, from a woman who arrived at 5 a.m. on her last shift to make jollof rice for the kitchen. The training program ran for the first time on a Tuesday morning in December. Tabena stood at the front of the staff room with a printed copy of the note from the corkboard. He read it to them once. He didn't say anything after. He let it sit in the room the way it sat on the corkboard, quietly, permanently, taking up exactly as much space as it needed. The program was named after Amma. What Nana did that Thursday evening cost her a bowl of soup, a plate of jollof, a cup of ginger tea, and the 40 minutes she spent sitting beside a woman she had never met. What she received in return is harder to account for. But it moved through the kitchen the next morning when the sous chef arrived early and found Tabetta at his station an hour before service. Not cooking, just standing, with the note from the corkboard in his hand. And it moved through the floor staff on the night of the first training, and it moved through the restaurant on the first Thursday of the new year when a daze came through the front door and the hostess, the same one, said, "Miss Owusu, your table is ready," and led her to the corner table with a copper-colored window cloth where 2 candles were already lit. Ediz set her coat over the back of the chair. She sat down. She looked at the candles. She thought about her sister telling someone in a year she would never be able to pinpoint now that the candles were the most important thing, that people who came in feeling invisible needed to be able to see their own hands. She looked at her own hands in the light. The shea butter had not fully absorbed. Her knuckles were still rough. The crack in her phone screen was still there. Her coat still had the slightly darker brown thread at the right cuff. She was 51 years old, and she had walked 9 blocks in 38-degree weather 3 Thursdays ago to keep a promise she had made without words to a person who was no longer here to see it kept. She had kept it. The soup arrived. It was the same soup. The kitchen had not changed that recipe in 22 years, and it would not change it now. The man the world overlooks for his coat. The woman turned away because of what she's carrying. The person standing on the wrong side of a glass door. They are not the forgotten ones. They are often the ones holding the thing that holds everything together, the ones who carry the photographs, the ones who come back a third time, not because they haven't learned their lesson, but because they know what they promised. You can close a door on a person. You can do it cleanly, professionally, without raising your voice, and be back at your podium before the person on the sidewalk has finished standing still. But you cannot close a door on what they're carrying. It was already inside before you decided who they were. Ediz Owusu did not need that restaurant. She had walked 9 blocks through 38-degree cold for someone else, not for herself. But the light from those candles reached her anyway, the way light does when you stop trying to manage it. If you've ever carried something for someone who couldn't carry it anymore, you already know what this story is about. And if you've ever been the person on the wrong side of a door, not because of who you are, but because of what someone decided when they looked at you, then you know that the most important thing isn't always that the door opens. It's that you didn't put down what you were carrying. Leave your answer in the comments. If you had spent 22 years somewhere and you knew you weren't going to retire there, what would you leave behind for the people who came after you? Not a thing, but truth. What would the note say? Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.